Hi, if you've been following our recent videos covering things like Podman and a little bit about the OpenShift container platform and just in general more modern Kubernetes build and deployment approaches, this is another video and we welcome you back to start looking at some differences between Podman and Builda. So this probably covers it for anyone who understands the nuances, but basically, Podman run replicates a Docker run and a Builda run replicates the run command in a Dockerfile. So a bit of nuance there, maybe for folks that are slightly less familiar with some of this, but we're going to use this video to step through some basics on just working with Builda on the command line and get a feel for really what it does and how it does it. So we've already done some of the initial steps, but just to highlight that installing Builda is relatively straightforward, similar to building or using Podman and installing that. It does, as of today, seem like it's only got mainstream support for RHEL-based, Linux-based systems. Not sure what the long-term plans are for things like Mac OS or other OSs, but it does work well on those RHEL-based systems. And so we've already cloned the GitHub repo that we were working with previously. And so here we're going to demonstrate what Builda can do to actually install or build from a Docker file. It doesn't have to use a Docker file to build a container, but it can. And so that's helpful. And so as this starts, similar to other videos, we'll go ahead and pause just to conserve time, and we'll come back when this build is actually completed. So we see that it's starting to do its work to pull down the node image, and we'll pause here. And we're back. So it looks like it managed to build that okay, and we'll just walk through the basic steps here. So we see that it effectively executed that Docker file and went ahead and committed it as well. And so next we're actually going to run this to create a container for ourselves. We see that that is now done. And we can see that we have an image here that we had worked on. And so what we should also be able to do with the container that we just created is go ahead and inspect that. And it provides a lot of information similar to an inspect that you would do with Docker or something like that, but we can see quite a bit of information there. We can next go ahead and actually step into that container just to see what it may have to tell us. For instance, looking at the file system. And so now what we should be able to do as well, if we can, is we can go ahead and see that we've created a new file here called out that wasn't previously found. And so from this point, what we're trying to demonstrate next is that we are the same way that we can build, or I guess the inverse of being able to build containers from images is to be able to build images from containers. So not necessarily to say that this would be a very common thing to do. Mostly you'd be working with some type of pipeline approach, whatever application changes you were making. But the fact is that you are in a position where you can, if you make a modification to a container, you can go ahead and commit that as a new image on its own. And so that's really what we're doing here. We're taking the container as is, and then we're able to go ahead and build another image from that. And then subsequently we'll step into that new container from the image that we pulled. And so this should be a relatively straightforward process. I'll go ahead and pause just to give it a second so that we don't lose a lot of time on the video. We'll come back. And we're back. I hope the pauses don't make it seem like we are spending a lot of time on any of these steps. Are all relatively straightforward. But we do see here that it was able to commit from the existing container that we had a new one. And so the next step will be to actually go and launch a container from that new image. And that should happen relatively fast. And then from there, we should be in a position where we can actually step right into this. And so here we are, and we should be able to see this file having actually been set up here. But if we went back to the original image, that file would not be found. And so what we're also able to do from here is actually see the containers that we're running. And this is, once again, just to get a kind of a basic feel of what we have, right? We've just generated an initial image, created a container from that, created an image from that container, and now we have a new container. That's all flowing very nicely. And again, it gives us a little bit of perspective on Builda and some of the ways that we can start to integrate it into what we're doing with builds and deployments.